Jimin begged Jungkook not to leave the room, but his silence hurt more. Don't open that door, Jungkook, please. Jimin's voice cracked, raw and trembling, as his fingers clutched the back of Jungkook's shirt. The dimness of the dorm hallway light spilled into the dark room, casting a narrow strip of gold across Jungkook's tense silhouette. His hand lingered on the doorknob, unmoving, as if frozen between escape and collapse. The air was thick, humid with the remnants of a storm outside and even heavier with the storm between them. The scent of cold rain mixed with the faint traces of Jimin's cologne, the one Jungkook had always secretly liked, warm, soft, familiar, but tonight it felt suffocating. Jimin swallowed hard as his breath shook against Jungkook's back. Talk to me. Say anything. Yell. Curse. I don't care. Just don't walk out like this. Silence. Not the peaceful kind, this was the brutal, cutting kind, the silence that felt like being abandoned slowly, inch by inch. Jungkook's shoulders rose and fell with a deep inhale, but he still didn't speak. His jaw flexed, the tendons in his neck pulled tight. The light framed the tension in his face, the dark bruised circles beneath his eyes, the way his lips pressed into a shaky line. For a second, Jimin thought he'd break. He hoped he would break. He needed him to break, because if Jungkook stayed silent one more second, Jimin feared he might shatter first. Jimin released his grip just enough for Jungkook to turn. Jungkook didn't look at him immediately, his gaze drifted downward, tracing the wooden floorboards as if the answers he refused to say were carved there. When he finally met Jimin's eyes, there was no anger. No hatred. Just exhaustion, an exhaustion Jimin recognized too well, the kind that comes from holding in pain too long. Why? Jimin whispered, voice smaller than before. Why can't you just tell me what happened? It was supposed to be simple. A conversation. A misunderstanding. A minor argument blown too big by stress and schedules, and the ghosts neither of them admitted lived inside them. But the moment Jungkook walked into the room earlier, his eyes distant, his answers clipped, his hands trembling slightly, Jimin knew something deeper was wrong. Something bigger than a fight. Something Jungkook wasn't ready to name. Jungkook dropped his gaze again, but Jimin stepped closer, closing the last fragile inches between them. He reached for Jungkook's hand, the one still wrapped around the doorknob. Jungkook didn't pull away, but he didn't hold back either. He simply stood there. Unresponsive. Unreachable. That hurt more than shouting ever could. Don't shut me out like this, Jimin said, the desperation in his voice rising. You promised you wouldn't. You promised you'd tell me when something's wrong. I can't. 2 words, barely audible, but they landed with the weight of a confession too heavy for the air around them. Jimin blinked, stunned. He had been begging for Jungkook to speak, and now that he had, the words sliced deeper than silence. You can't. What? Jimin asked, breath catching. Jungkook's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He wiped a thumb beneath his eye, though there were no tears, only the threat of them. I can't talk about it, Jungkook forced out. Not tonight. Jimin felt something twist painfully in his chest. Because not tonight meant I don't trust myself. I don't trust you. I don't trust what will happen if I tell you the truth. He stepped even closer, until their foreheads nearly brushed. Then don't talk, Jimin murmured, his voice trembling with a different kind of vulnerability now. Just stay. Jungkook's eyes fluttered shut for a moment, and Jimin could feel the warmth of his breath ghost over his skin. It was soft, but uneven, like a held-back sob or a cracked confession trying to escape. I don't deserve that, Jungkook whispered. The room tightened around them. Jimin's heart dropped. Is that what this is about? Something you think you did? Something you think I'd hate you for? Jungkook shook his head but still refused to look up. His silence returned, and this time it wasn't empty, it was full. Heavy with guilt. Heavy with fear. Heavy with something Jimin had never seen in him before. Jimin reached up, gently cupping Jungkook's cheek. The warmth beneath his palm was trembling. Jungkook, look at me. Slowly, Jungkook did, and when he did, Jimin saw it, the fear that had kept him quiet, the guilt that had kept him distant, the secret that had been eating him alive in silence. Whatever he was holding, it was destroying him. Jimin exhaled deeply, voice soft but firm. Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. You don't have to walk out that door. Jungkook's lips parted, as if he might speak again, but instead, he let out a trembling breath and covered Jimin's hand with his own warm, shaking real, the kind of touch that meant I'm scared, But I'm trying. Asterisk for the first time that night, Jungkook stepped away from the door, not toward escape, but toward Jimin. The storm outside rumbled softly, like distant thunder calming after a violent flash. The rain pattered against the window, gentle now, almost melodic. Jimin felt Jungkook's forehead rest against his shoulder, heavy and tired. He wrapped his arms around him slowly, careful, as if Jungkook might break like glass. "You're safe," Jimin whispered against his hair. "You don't have to say anything yet. Just breathe." Jungkook's breath hitched, and his fingers clutched Jimin's shirt with the same desperation Jimin had clutched his earlier. For the first time that night, Jungkook allowed himself to lean, allowed himself to need, allowed himself not to leave. The silence remained, but now it wasn't a weapon. It was an unspoken understanding, a fragile truce, a temporary refuge. Tonight, silence didn't hurt more. Tonight, silence was healing, and for now, that was enough. For a long moment after Jimin wrapped his arms around him, Jungkook didn't move. He stayed pressed against Jimin's shoulder, his breaths shallow and uneven, as if the act of standing was already costing him every last piece of strength he had left. Jimin tightened his embrace just a little, just enough for Jungkook to feel the assurance in it, warm, steady, grounding. He could feel Jungkook's heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt, rapid and heavy like he'd just outrun something terrifying. Jimin's fingers found the back of Jungkook's head, gently brushing through the damp strands of his hair. "You're shaking," Jimin whispered. "Did something happen? Did someone say something?" Jungkook didn't answer, but his grip around Jimin's waist tightened, as if the question alone had struck a nerve. His silence wasn't empty, it had shape, weight, intent. There was something he was hiding, something he was terrified of letting slip. Jimin felt the tension coil tighter in Jungkook's body. Slowly, carefully, he pulled back just enough to look at Jungkook's face. Jungkook avoided his eyes again, but not out of defiance. It felt like guilt. Like shame. Like he couldn't bear for Jimin to see whatever he was carrying. "Hey," Jimin said softly. "Look at me." Jungkook closed his eyes, brows knitting together, as if the simple request was too painful to obey. "Jungkook," Jimin tried again, firmer this time. "Let me in." Jungkook finally looked up, but the moment their eyes met, Jimin's breath hitched. Jungkook's eyes were red, glassy, rimmed with exhaustion, pleading without words. He forced a smile, a small, broken one, as if trying to pretend nothing was wrong. It only made Jimin's chest tighten further. "You don't have to pretend," Jimin whispered. Jungkook's lips parted, trembling slightly. "If I tell you, you'll think I'm weak." Jimin's eyes widened. "What?" "Jungkook, how could you ever think that?" "Because it's true." His voice cracked. "I'm not strong enough for this anymore." The confession sliced through the room like lightning. Jimin took Jungkook's face in both hands, forcing him to hold his gaze. "You're one of the strongest people I know." "That's not strength," Jungkook whispered, blinking hard. "That's just me surviving because I don't know what else to do." The storm inside him was finally spilling through the cracks. Jimin exhaled shakily. "Tell me what's happening. Please. You're scaring me." Jungkook opened his mouth to speak, but before the words could come out, something else did. A sharp, frustrated sound escaped him as he pulled away from Jimin and raked both hands through his hair, pacing the small room like a trapped animal. His breaths were fast now, too fast. Jimin watched him with alarm. "Jungkook, slow down." "What's wrong?" "I messed up." Jungkook's voice broke. "I messed up so bad." Jimin's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Jungkook stopped pacing, fists trembling at his sides. His eyes darted to the floor, then the window, then anywhere except Jimin's face. "I said something I shouldn't have." "To who?" "To someone who shouldn't have heard it." The words struck Jimin like a cold wave. "Jungkook," he said quietly. "What exactly did you say?" Jungkook shook his head, swallowing hard. "It wasn't supposed to come out like that. I didn't mean for it to be overheard." "You're scaring me," Jimin said again, voice softer now, almost pleading. "Just tell me." Jungkook's hand hovered near his mouth, shaking, as if the memory itself burned him. "I told someone," he whispered, voice cracking, "that I didn't trust anyone anymore." Jimin froze. Jungkook squeezed his eyes shut, fists clenching. "And they asked if that included you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Jungkook's voice dropped to a faint, trembling whisper. "And I didn't answer." A slow, painful ache unfurled in Jimin's chest. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at Jungkook, confused, hurt, startled. Jimin, Jungkook whispered, his expression collapsing at the sight of the pain flickering across Jimin's face. I didn't mean it like that. I swear. The hurt was sharp, but Jimin forced himself to stay steady. Then why couldn't you say no? Why couldn't you tell them you trusted me? I was overwhelmed, Jungkook said breathlessly. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't even myself. Everything just, he grabbed his hair again. I froze. Jimin inhaled slowly. So you didn't answer. And they assumed the worst. I don't care what they assumed, Jungkook said quickly. I care about what you think. Jimin stepped closer, face inches from Jungkook's. The tension between them thickened, heavy, heated, emotionally charged. Then tell me the truth, Jimin whispered. Do you trust me, or not? Jungkook's breath hitched. The question wasn't simple. It wasn't gentle. It forced the deepest part of him to surface. Jungkook looked at Jimin like he was standing on the edge of something dangerous, like one wrong step would send both of them falling. I trust you more than anyone else, Jungkook said, voice trembling. But I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of disappointing you. I'm scared that if you see all of me, all the ugly, broken parts, you'll walk away first. The confession came out like a wound splitting open. Jimin felt his own throat tighten, emotions rising like a tide he couldn't stop. He reached for Jungkook again, gently grabbing the back of his neck, pulling him closer until their foreheads touched. Listen to me, Jimin whispered, voice low and fierce. You're not losing me. Do you hear me? You're not disappointing me. You don't have to hide anything from me. Jungkook exhaled shakily against him, eyes fluttering shut. Then why do I feel like everything I say is going to make you hate me? Because you're tired, Jimin whispered. Because you've been hurting alone for too long. Jungkook leaned in, like he needed Jimin's presence to breathe. Jimin. His voice was barely a whisper. I don't want to fall apart. Then fall apart here, Jimin murmured, brushing his thumb slowly across Jungkook's cheek. With me. Jungkook let out a trembling breath, the last traces of resistance slipping from him, and for the first time since the night began, his voice softened, small and vulnerable. Don't let go. I won't, Jimin whispered, pulling him into his arms again. Not now. Not ever. Jungkook sagged against him, arms wrapping around Jimin with a fierceness that felt desperate, almost frantic, like he had been holding himself together by force and finally allowed himself to collapse. And Jimin held him, grounding him with steady breaths, warm hands, and the quiet reassurance that Jungkook was no longer alone. The storm outside continued, soft and distant, but inside the room, the real storm, the one inside Jungkook, finally had a place to land. Jimin could feel Jungkook's heartbeat still pounding against him long after the trembling settled. The room was warm now, not from the heater, but from the closeness of two people who had been orbiting the edge of something dangerous all night. Jimin kept one hand resting at the back of Jungkook's neck, gently massaging the tension there, while the other smoothed comforting circles along his spine. Slowly, very slowly, Jungkook pulled away, though his fingers lingered on Jimin's shirt as if afraid that releasing him completely would send him drifting into the dark again. Jimin studied his face, tired, shaken, too pale, and brushed a thumb across Jungkook's cheekbone. Can you breathe now? Jungkook nodded faintly, though the sound of his breath was still uneven. A little. Good. We'll take this one step at a time. But the moment Jimin said that, Jungkook's expression changed, like the reminder of what had happened earlier dug right back into his thoughts. His shoulders stiffened, his gaze dropped, and the light in his eyes dimmed. Who heard you? Jimin asked softly. Jungkook hesitated. The silence stretched, long enough that Jimin could feel something cold coil in his stomach. He leaned just a little closer, trying to read the tension in Jungkook's eyes. Jungkook, Jimin said, voice low, tell me. Who overheard you? Jungkook swallowed hard. A staff member. Jimin blinked. Which staff? Jungkook's jaw tensed in a way that told Jimin this wasn't just any staff. His silence was sharper now, wary, guarded, almost frightened. Jimin stepped closer without meaning to, instinct tightening inside him. Who exactly? Jungkook exhaled shakily. Manager Seo. The name hit the room like a slap. Jimin's eyes widened. You're joking. I'm not. Manager Seo, strict, cold, and notoriously perceptive. He was the kind of man who observed everything and said nothing, but he never forgot information. He stored it, used it, weaponized it if needed. And he had always watched Jungkook a little too closely, not out of care, but out of expectation. Out of pressure. Out of control. Jimin's voice dropped into a whisper. What did he say to you? Jungkook let out a humorless breath. He told me to get my act together before rumors start. Jimin's stomach twisted. Rumors about what? Jungkook didn't answer. The silence between them shifted, no longer comforting, but sharp and electric. Jimin felt his pulse quicken, a heat rising in him that wasn't anger at Jungkook, but at anyone who dared to corner him like that. What exactly does he think he heard? Jimin asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Jungkook sat down on the edge of the bed slowly, his posture collapsing. He thinks I can't handle things anymore. That I'm unstable. He stopped and ran a hand over his face. That I'm losing control. Jimin moved closer until he stood right in front of him. You're not unstable. You're stressed. And exhausted. Anyone would break down under what you went through this week. Jungkook looked up at him with a hollow smile. That's not what he thinks. What did he say, Jungkook? Jimin pressed gently. Jungkook hesitated, breath caught in his throat. He said, if I keep acting like this, he'll have to report it. Jimin felt a rush of heat surge through his chest. Report? To who? To the higher-ups. Jungkook laughed bitterly. He said he's concerned about my mental fitness. Jimin clenched his hands at his sides. He had no right. He heard me, Jungkook whispered. He heard me say I don't trust anyone. And then he saw me freeze when he asked if that included you. It wasn't just the confession that hurt, it was the vulnerability behind it. The way Jungkook's voice shrank. The way his eyes kept drifting to the floor, as if afraid of seeing disappointment reflected in Jimin's expression. Jimin knelt in front of him, leveling their eyes. Jungkook, look at me. Jungkook raised his gaze slowly. There is nothing wrong with needing space. Nothing wrong with breaking down. Nothing wrong with fear, Jimin said, voice firm but gentle. But what he's implying? That's manipulation. That's crossing a line. Jungkook's voice cracked. I don't want them to think I can't do my job. You're human, Jimin said. Not a machine. Jungkook's hands clenched the sheets. They don't see it that way. Jimin exhaled sharply, fighting back a surge of anger. He had no right to threaten you like that. None. Jungkook shook his head. But this is exactly why I didn't want to tell you. Why? Jimin whispered. Because I didn't want you to think I was weak, Jungkook said, voice strained. Or that I was dragging you into something that should be my burden. Jimin felt something break inside him, not from pain, but from the overwhelming tenderness of hearing those words. Your burdens are never just yours, Jimin whispered, placing a hand over Jungkook's trembling one. Not when it comes to me. Jungkook inhaled sharply, eyes glistening again. The tension in his face softened, just slightly, but his voice still held a tremor. You don't understand, Jimin. If this escalates, it won't just affect me. It'll affect us. Jimin blinked. Us. Jungkook froze, realizing what he just said. The air thickened instantly, heated, intimate, dangerous. Jimin's voice softened to something fragile. Jungkook, what do you mean by us? Jungkook's throat tightened visibly. His eyes darted away, then back, then away again. I mean the team. The group. The everything. But the hesitation said everything he didn't. Jimin moved even closer until their knees touched. Look at me and say that's what you meant. Jungkook didn't. His silence wasn't empty now, it pulsed with something hot, unsteady, wild. Jimin felt the shift between them, like the room tilted, like the air sharpened, like they were suddenly standing on forbidden ground. Jungkook's breath grew uneven again. Jimin, he whispered, barely audible, please don't make me say something I can't take back. Jimin felt his own pulse quicken. You don't have to say it. Just tell me what you're scared of losing. Jungkook swallowed hard. You, he breathed. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Jungkook froze, eyes widening in instant panic, as if he just exposed something that had been caged for too long. Jimin stared at him, stunned, not because he didn't expect it, but because hearing it aloud was like having the ground shift under his feet. Jungkook immediately looked away, voice cracking. Forget I said that. I didn't mean yes, you did, Jimin whispered. Jungkook's breath hitched sharply. Jimin reached up, gently cupping Jungkook's face so he couldn't look away. You did mean it. And I'm not running from it. Jungkook's eyes widened, his pulse racing so fast Jimin could almost feel it from where he stood. Jimin, he whispered, voice trembling. Don't, but Jimin shook his head, soft but firm. You're not losing me. Not because of manager Seo. Not because of rumors. Not because of fear. Jungkook's eyes shone with a mix of relief and terror, an expression of someone who had been drowning silently and was only now surfacing for air. Jimin leaned slightly closer, close enough that Jungkook could feel the warmth of his breath against his skin. I'm right here, Jimin murmured. And I'm not going anywhere. Jungkook inhaled sharply, too sharply. His breath faltered, his eyes fluttered, and his hands reached instinctively for Jimin's wrists, gripping them with a heat that wasn't desperation now. It was something deeper, something rawer, something neither of them had dared acknowledge. The tension between them snapped tight, electric and dangerous. And for the first time all night, Jungkook didn't hide. He whispered, barely holding himself together, then don't let anyone take you away from me. Jimin's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. No one will. Their foreheads brushed accidental, but charged. Their breaths tangled, hot and uneven. Jungkook's hands slid slowly from Jimin's wrists to his shoulders, gripping with a quiet intensity that made Jimin's heart stumble. Their closeness was no longer gentle comfort, it was a magnetic pull, fierce and unspoken. The storm outside quieted, but inside the room, something else ignited, fragile, forbidden, and impossibly real, and neither of them stepped back. Jungkook didn't move. Jimin didn't either. It was as if the room itself held its breath, afraid to disturb whatever fragile, dangerous truth had finally surfaced between them. Their foreheads remained close, the warmth of their skin brushing in the smallest, most intimate spark, accidental yet deliberate, innocent yet undeniably charged. Jimin could feel Jungkook's breath tremble against his lips, each exhale unsteady, as if Jungkook was fighting a dozen instincts at once: run, hide, speak, break, lean in, pull away. His hands tightened on Jimin's shoulders, and the tension in his fingers wasn't fear this time. It was wanting. Needing not reassurance, but him. Jimin whispered, almost afraid of the impact the words might have. Kook. That single syllable nearly undid Jungkook. His fingers clenched harder, and his eyes squeezed shut as if the sound burned straight through him. Don't say my name like that, Jungkook breathed, voice hoarse. Like what? Jimin whispered back, breath brushing Jungkook's skin. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Like you're the only one who's allowed to say it. Jimin's heart lurched violently in his chest. Before he could respond, Jungkook exhaled sharply and stepped back, just a little, but the distance was barely an inch. He pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, taking slow breaths, trying to steady himself. This is getting out of hand, Jungkook murmured, voice strained. We're crossing lines. Jimin fought the urge to pull him back. Maybe the lines were meant to be crossed. Jungkook's eyes shot up, wide and wounded. Don't say that. Why not? Because you don't understand what you're risking, Jungkook whispered. What I'm risking? Jimin stepped closer again, refusing to let the space grow. Then explain it to me. Jungkook laughed quietly, a soft, broken sound. Explain? Jimin, if I explain everything, you'll hate me. Jimin's chest tightened. Stop saying that. It's true. It's not. You don't know what I've been hiding. Jimin placed a gentle hand against Jungkook's cheek again. Jungkook leaned into the touch, eyes closing as if he'd been starved for this kind of tenderness. Then tell me, Jimin whispered. Jungkook inhaled sharply. I can't. You can, Jimin insisted. No. Jungkook's voice shook. If I say it out loud, everything will change. Everything. Jimin softened his tone, slow and pulled from the deepest part of him. Jungkook, everything already changed the moment you said you're scared of losing me. Jungkook's breath caught for a moment, neither said a word. Jimin watched him carefully, every flicker of panic, every tremor, every silent plea for help he couldn't voice. Finally, Jungkook whispered, I didn't just say that because I was scared. I said it because, he swallowed hard, because it's the truth. Jimin's breath hitched. Then what are you afraid of? Jungkook hesitated, but not like before. This hesitation felt like a door creaking open, Slow but deliberate. I'm afraid, Jungkook whispered, that if anyone finds out, they'll tear us apart. Jimin frowned. There's no us for them to tear apart. Jungkook's chest rose in a shaky breath. That's the problem. The air cracked between them. Jimin's eyes widened, understanding dawned, and his pulse stumbled so hard he nearly missed a breath. But Jungkook was already pulling away, pacing the room like he was trying to outrun what he'd just revealed. I shouldn't have said that, Jungkook muttered. I shouldn't even be thinking it. Thinking what? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook stopped. His back to Jimin. His shoulders shaking. That it hurts more to imagine life without you than it does to face the world's judgment. Jimin's throat tightened. Jungkook. Don't, Jungkook said, voice cracking. Don't try to fix this. Don't pretend it's simple. I'm not pretending. You should be, Jungkook whispered. For your own good. Jimin took a slow step forward. Then another. Until he stood right behind Jungkook. He lifted a trembling hand and placed it lightly against Jungkook's back. The reaction was immediate. Jungkook inhaled sharply, like the touch shocked him. His shoulders tensed, then sagged, as if his body didn't know whether to melt into the comfort or pull away from the danger. Turn around, Jimin whispered. Jungkook didn't move. Jungkook, please. It was the please that broke him. He turned, slowly, painfully slowly, and faced Jimin. The moment their eyes met, Jungkook's entire composure cracked. His breath stuttered, his lips parted in a silent ache, and Jimin could see clearly now the storm Jungkook had been carrying alone. Fear, want, regret, longing, all mixed into something too strong for Jungkook to hide anymore. Jimin stepped closer, lifting a hand to cup Jungkook's jaw. Look at me. Jungkook did. Whatever it is, Jimin whispered, you're not facing it alone. Not anymore. Jungkook's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Then promise me something. Anything. Promise me. His voice cracked. That you won't leave even if you find out everything. Jimin didn't hesitate. I'm not leaving. Jungkook's breath trembled, but he shook his head. You don't know what you're promising. Then tell me. Jungkook's eyes were glassy now. Vulnerable. Raw. He threatened me, Jimin. Jimin froze. Manager Seo? Yes. What did he threaten? Jungkook closed his eyes, as if saying it might break him. He said if he sees us getting too close again, he'll report it to the company. The shock hit Jimin so hard he actually stumbled back a step. Jungkook's face twisted in pain. I think he already has rumors. I think he's watching us. I think he's waiting for the moment I slip. Jimin stared at him, heart pounding. Why would he? Because he thinks you're the reason I've been distracted. He thinks you're the reason I'm off. And is that true? Jimin whispered. Jungkook's breath stuttered, and he looked at Jimin with an expression so vulnerable it shattered whatever defense Jimin had left. Yes, Jungkook whispered. You are the reason I can't think straight. The room tilted. And you're the reason I don't sleep, Jungkook continued softly. Jimin's breath caught. And the reason I keep checking the door every night to make sure you're still here. Jimin felt his heart lurch violently. And the reason I'm terrified to speak, Jungkook whispered, voice breaking, because I know one wrong word could destroy everything. Jimin stepped forward slowly, because if he moved too fast, Jungkook might run. Or break. Or both. He placed both hands on Jungkook's face, holding him gently, tenderly, securely. You're not losing anything, Jimin whispered. Not me. Not us. Not tonight. Jungkook's lips parted, trembling with a confession he couldn't contain anymore. Jimin. But Jimin shook his head, pressing a gentle thumb over Jungkook's lips. Not yet, he whispered. You don't have to say it before you're ready. Jungkook's breath shuddered out of him, and he closed his eyes, leaning into Jimin's touch as if it was the only thing holding him together. The storm outside finally faded into silence, but inside the room, the real storm had only just begun. The night air outside the dorm was thick with the taste of rain, but inside the practice room the heat between them rose like steam off asphalt. Jimin slammed the door behind him so hard the mirrors rattled, his breath jagged, his eyes carrying a fire that Jungkook had never seen burn this recklessly. Say something, Jimin demanded, stepping forward until their chests almost brushed. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with pressure, like a dam ready to burst. Anything. Even if it's cruel. Just don't stand there like I'm a stranger to you. Jungkook didn't flinch. His silence wasn't passive, it was sharp, deliberate, defensive. He crossed his arms over his chest, gaze fixed on the wooden floor as though it held the answer he refused to say out loud. Jimin exhaled sharply, shaking his head as he paced around him. You disappeared for 2 days, Jungkook. 2 days. Do you know what that did to me? Do you care? His voice cracked on the last word, and he bit down on his lip hard enough to leave a mark. Jungkook finally lifted his eyes, and beneath the stoic mask Jimin found the shadow of something darker, heavier, simmering beneath the surface like molten metal. You think I don't care, he said in a low, strained whisper, because caring is exactly what got us here. Jimin froze. Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, Jungkook replied, his voice stiffened with anger he never intended to show. You want honesty? I left because every second around you feels like standing in a room full of explosives waiting for one spark. Jimin stepped closer, violating whatever thin boundary still remained between them. Then let it blow up. At least then we'll know the truth instead of dancing around it like cowards. Jungkook's jaw clenched. You don't want the truth. I do, Jimin hissed. I've been begging for it. Jungkook took a slow step back, but Jimin followed without hesitation, refusing to let the distance grow. The tension between them thrummed in the room, electric enough to make the lights feel too bright. Jimin, Jungkook said quietly, if I tell you what I'm holding back, you'll hate me. Jimin shook his head instantly. I won't. You will. I won't. His voice softened then, only slightly. Tell me. Jungkook raked a hand through his hair, steadying himself with a breath so long it trembled by the time he released it. Fine. You want it. Here. His eyes locked onto Jimin's. I left because I don't trust myself around you anymore. Because the second you look at me like I'm the only person in the room, everything in me wants to cross a line we can't come back from. Jimin's breath stilled. Jungkook pressed on, each word rough and honest. You think I'm silent because I don't care. But I'm silent because I care too much, and it scares the hell out of me. For a moment the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them, the echo of Jungkook's confession hanging between them like a fragile thread that could snap with one move. Jimin's voice softened, though fire still burned in every syllable. You think I don't feel the same? You think I haven't been fighting myself every time your hand brushes mine? Or when you laugh and look away like you don't notice me watching you? His hand lifted, hovering near Jungkook's jaw before stopping, trembling. I'm not afraid of what happens next. You are. Jungkook's eyes went wide, vulnerable, exposed in a way he hated and needed all at once. And that's why I begged you not to leave, Jimin whispered. Because you running away hurts more than anything you could possibly say. The silence this time wasn't cruel. It was heavy with meaning, thick with everything they had spent months pretending not to feel. But Jimin wasn't finished. You want to know what terrified me the most while you were gone? He asked. Jungkook didn't respond, but the slight shift of his weight signaled he was listening. I was scared that you left because you finally realized I wasn't worth the mess we've created between us. Jungkook took a step forward, this time without hesitation, his voice firm and low. Don't ever say that again. Jimin opened his mouth, but Jungkook cut him off with a rare flicker of frustration. You have no idea how much A loud knock suddenly thundered on the door, slicing through the rising intensity. Both turned. A staff member's urgent voice filtered through the wood, breathless and rushed. Jungkook, Jimin, there's a problem. A serious one. You both need to come out here. The tension snapped, the unresolved words dissolved, and the world outside their private storm came crashing in. The hallway outside the practice room swarmed with frantic voices, hurried footsteps, and the sharp crackle of tension that sliced through the air like static before a lightning strike. Jimin and Jungkook stepped out together, their breath still tangled from the intensity of the moment they had been forced to abandon. Their shoulders brushed as they walked, a silent tether pulling them toward the chaos ahead. The staff member who had knocked on the door approached them with a grave expression. There's been a leak, she said quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the noise of rushing employees. A private clip from earlier today. A camera caught you both arguing in the hallway, very closely. She hesitated. And it's spreading fast. Jimin felt the bottom of his stomach drop. Jungkook inhaled sharply, every muscle in his body tightening as though instinctively preparing for impact. How fast? Jungkook asked, voice low, controlled, but unmistakably strained. Millions of views in minutes, she replied. Some fans are speculating. Others are accusing. It's a mess. Management needs you both immediately. Jimin closed his eyes for half a second, not in fear, but in the crushing realization that everything they'd kept hidden, everything they'd swallowed and buried, was now exposed under a spotlight they never wanted. But Jungkook glanced sideways at him, and for the first time all night, Jimin didn't see fear. He saw resolve. The meeting room was cold, painfully bright, and filled with stern faces around a long table. The air felt unforgiving, heavy with unspoken judgment. Jungkook and Jimin sat side by side, close enough that their knees touched beneath the table, small contact that grounded them in a world spinning too fast. A manager cleared his throat. We need to know exactly what happened between you two. There it was. The question they had avoided for months. The question that might define their careers. The question neither of them wanted to answer under fluorescent lights and corporate eyes. Jimin's heart pounded. He opened his mouth, ready to take the blame, to lie if he had to, just to protect Jungkook. But Jungkook spoke first. It's my fault, he said steadily. I walked away from him. I avoided him. And the argument today was because of the pressure I created. Jimin's head snapped toward him. Jungkook, no, it's the truth, Jungkook insisted softly, but his voice carried enough weight to silence the entire room. And there's more. The managers exchanged glances, sensing something deeper, something dangerous. Jungkook continued, though his voice gentled. I care about him. More than I should. More than I meant to. And I didn't know how to handle it, so I ran from it. That's why we argued. Not because we hate each other. Jimin's chest tightened, and he felt a sting behind his eyes, sharp, hot, impossible to hide. Jungkook wasn't just admitting it. He was choosing him. Even at a table full of people who could tear everything apart. One of the older managers leaned back, sighing heavily as he rubbed his forehead. We can't control rumors, he muttered. But we can control the narrative. Jimin held his breath. We'll release a statement that it was a personal disagreement, stress, exhaustion. Nothing romantic. Nothing inappropriate. Just two members dealing with pressure. Jungkook straightened. If that protects the team, fine. It protects you both, the manager corrected. But this can't happen again. Whatever it is between you, keep it contained. No more emotional scenes on camera. He dismissed them with a wave outside the room, away from judging eyes. Jimin exhaled shakily. The hallway was quiet, dim, the fluorescent hum suddenly softer now that they were alone again. Jungkook leaned against the wall, running a tired hand through his hair. You didn't have to take the blame, Jimin whispered. I wasn't taking the blame, Jungkook replied gently. I was telling the truth. Jimin looked up at him, searching his face for any flicker of regret, fear, doubt. But Jungkook's eyes held steady, steady in a way that made Jimin's breath catch. What now? Jimin asked, voice barely audible. Jungkook stepped forward, close enough that Jimin felt the heat of him, the gravity of everything unsaid but understood. Now, Jungkook murmured, we stop running. Jimin swallowed. From each other? From ourselves, Jungkook whispered. For a moment they simply stood there, two hearts bruised but beating, two souls pulled and tested and tangled by everything they felt and everything they feared. Jungkook raised a hand, slowly, giving Jimin time to stop him if he wanted. Jimin didn't. The touch that followed Jungkook's hand cupping the side of Jimin's neck felt like a confession in itself. You begged me not to leave, Jungkook said softly. And I listened. I'm here. Jimin's breath trembled. Don't disappear again. I won't, Jungkook promised, and this time his voice didn't shake. The rain began outside, the soft patter growing louder, almost echoing the rhythm of their unsteady but hopeful hearts. The world felt uncertain, the future blurry and fragile, but in this quietly lit hallway the storm that mattered most finally settled. Jimin leaned forward, resting his forehead lightly against Jungkook's. A small, tired smile tugged at his lips. We'll figure it out, he whispered. Jungkook's eyes softened. Together. And in that small, breath-stealing moment, without fireworks or dramatic shouts, without chaos or cliffhanger or the need to run anymore, something undeniably real formed between them, messy, imperfect, brave, not a scandal. Not a mistake. A choice. The end.